being able to unpack the layers of being your true self and then fly, dedicate yourself to it, keep going, don't give up. If you stick with it and you keep going, one day you're going to fly. And it's going to be like an entire new magic show open for you, and you're going to love practice. Stick with it. This advice is prudent for podcasting.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, it's your host, Adam Adams, and today I'm with Jackson Calame, and we're going to be talking about something you need to know if you're a podcaster. There is a better way to do it, and there is a normal way to do it, and Jackson's going to talk a little bit about that. So let's dive in with him. Jackson, I want to just start by letting the listener know how many episodes you've been doing. I don't usually let people give bios, by the way, Jackson. I'm like, no bios. That's boring. However, with some of the things that you've done with other people and learned through podcasting, that background, I think, is going to be beneficial to what we're going to be sharing today.
I love it, Adam. Thanks for having me, man. And yeah, I got a weird background. And I think most of us out there have a weird background. All right. So kind of understand that's helpful. You mentioned episode count. I just went to visionproslive.com and checked. It says episode 2182. And we've got other podcasts that we have as well. And we have co-hosts. So trying to track the numbers is not something that I'm too obsessed with. I'm more of the Alex Hormozy style of, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to work on doing this my best for the next 10 years, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah. Hey, one takeaway from what you just mentioned is the 10-year idea. So if we can pause for a sec, I've noticed a lot of people that come to me to start a podcast, and they might say, yeah, I'm going to try this out for 6 months, or I'm going to try it out for a year. And I literally won't let them hire me. If they say, I'm going to do this for a whole year without quitting, I say, no, I'm sorry. You go and start it with somebody else. I want you to be thinking a minimum of 3 years, or else I'm not even going to work with you. And Jackson, your idea of giving it your best, giving your all for 10 years is really what I resonate with even more. So I appreciate you saying that. I hope that the listener heard that.
I love it. The other idea is cute, right?
Wait, tell me why you say that.
Well, 6 months, 1 year. You know what I mean. And those of you who get it know what I mean. And there's nothing wrong with cute. There's a lot of great things in life. It's not a condescending factor either. It's just a description of what priorities look like for people. But I love that you talked about there's a normal way to do it and there's the better. You do you. If you want to go that route, awesome. I'm not going that route though. My clients are going that route. But if you want to do that, you're going to be happier doing that without me. And I'm going to be happier doing it the way that I love to do this.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the idea of starting your podcast in the best way possible? So you've had multiple podcasts, multiple co-hosts, tons of episodes in the thousands. And from all of this and from your knowledge, in your experience, you still feel like there is a better way to do it. And it's probably not the way that the listener did it or would do it without hearing this podcast episode. So would you mind going into that?
Absolutely. There's always going to be a better way. And there's always room to appreciate the journey and to be grateful for where you're at. There's a philosophy behind this that really drives me. I learned that the meaning of namaste and aloha is one and the same. And they both mean myself honors yourself, which means I'm perfect the way that I am. You're perfect the way that you are. And change is also perfect. So making absolute space, humility, making absolute space for appreciation of where we're at. For me, God's there. He knows exactly where I'm at. He didn't make a mistake or where I'm at or where you're at. He's perfect. And so I have this opportunity, right? We say I have to evolve, or I should evolve, or I could do this, or I would have. I'm grateful for the present, and I try to stay very focused on that. And I'm grateful for where I get to go. So I launched my podcast by going live on Facebook. I don't even know if I had this mic plugged in or not. I called it a podcast. I published it. And my team member, Jaime, comes up and he's like, Jackson, that's not a podcast. A podcast has to have an RSS and this and that. And I went, it's my podcast. And he goes, but you have to have a website. You have to have this. And I said, not for my podcast. And he's like, well, you have to, Jaime, calm down. Like, Jaime, if you want to build all that, awesome. Go build it all. You're welcome to do that. But I'm going to go live again when I want to go live again. And I'm going to call it a podcast. And within a couple of months, we had 10,000 downloads or something. And I know those things are kind of important and I should be a wise steward of how I build this. At the end of the day, though, Adam, like Jake Larson of videopower.com, probably my greatest example of progress is far better than perfect. Go and launch, go and be, go and do what you want to do. And know that, you probably want to make sure you're not going to fall off a cliff or drive into a wall or do something stupid, but, accept whatever the consequences are and love, come what may and love it. It's another big concept for me is just now learning to appreciate that I'm meant to grow, I'm meant to fail, I'm meant to make mistakes. And how do I embrace all of that? Lifetime of getting your butt kicked. I think we all go through that, right?
So I want to ask, with your most recent episode, you're welcome to talk about who it is or what you talked about. You and I had a conversation right before we started recording. And I think you mentioned in the green room that that person had a certain philosophy on starting or launching a podcast, and you had a slightly different philosophy. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I said on LinkedIn that we fought like rabid hyenas in our show. It was Tom Fox. And we didn't fight like rabid hyenas. He took it really well, but most people would not take the level of conflict well that him and I engaged in. And so I'm a big fan of healthy conflict, and exploring different perspectives, which causes a little bit of a jar, right? Like, oh my gosh. I said we're going to talk about the good and the bad and the ugly of podcasting. And Tom's thoughts were there is no ugly to podcasting. And I had to hit back on that and say, let's look at that guy. I don't remember his name now. Billy McFarland, I think, that did the Fire Festival and went to prison because he couldn't fulfill on it. It's a pretty ugly story. It's a pretty ugly outcome. Ironically, he's recovering right now and he's doing Fire Festival 2.0 and a lot of people have already bought it. So we live in a strange world where you have the grace of being able to come back from almost anything these days. But there's a weird divide between those who are getting into podcast and like if you got a family to provide for, right? You got kids that are relying on you. You've got certain expectations of what's going to happen with that podcast. They're oftentimes out of alignment with reality. You might hurt yourself at a degree that you're not anticipating. You might publicly shame yourself and humiliate yourself in ways that you're not ready for the repercussions of. And that worries me as a healer of people. Like I love to help people. I hate to see people run into that brick wall or fall off of that cliff. But if you don't have any natural consequences that are going to occur for just running with it and winging it and making it happen, and you're going to be honest with the world, go for it. Just do it. But there are uglies with podcasting. I'm curious, Adam, on your side. Have you seen any uglies or am I wrong about that?
I can think of a few. One big one is starting it with with not enough thought process behind having a podcast. And it doesn't mean that you don't have a show. It just doesn't mean that you're going to get listeners. And so people say, hey, I'm going to start a podcast because, and then fill in the blank. They want to make more money. They want to grow their business. They want to give back to the world. I'm going to start a podcast because I want this or that. And then they start the podcast, but they don't make all of the things in line with the reason that they started. So they have the idea, but then they shoot from the hip. They kind of just do whatever. And it reminds me right now of a fish like flopping around, they're there, but they're not really getting anywhere. It hadn't been planned out. And the issue happens where they get into having a podcast and it ends up being where they are kind of their only listener because they didn't do some of the things right, which is super unfortunate because if you want to make income with a podcast or an impact, whether it's this eye or that eye, then it's going to be quite difficult if you don't have any other listeners. And so, yes, they technically
Correct.
have a show, but I think that that's an unfortunate thing is not launching it the right way, not getting in front of the right people, not knowing how to make everything congruent in the messaging, even the colors and the fonts maybe, but definitely the messaging, the people that you have on the podcast as guests, the questions that you ask should all fit with that one purpose. And a thing that people do, another thing is, because this goes along the same lines, but it's almost a second thing, whereas they think that they need to add value to everybody or to different people, where they say, you know, I can work with this type of person and I can work with this type of person. They're completely opposite. So, for example, I am an investor and I raise capital from people to buy more things. And I also could teach somebody how to invest the same way that I do. And if they have half of their information benefiting the person that could invest with them and half of their information benefiting the person that wants to do what they're doing, then for neither of those avatars are they fully adding value. They're just sometimes adding value to that person and sometimes adding value to the
I like what you said in the beginning. I don't necessarily like the last part because it reminds me of, well, that's what a heart surgeon does. So a heart surgeon has a team, and one person's job is to do something different than the other person's job. And so if they're guiding both of those individuals to help them on this heart surgery, no, neither person needs the same exact information as the other. So I think that goes back to more of a half glass empty view rather than a half glass full view of, I don't control what people say out of my podcast. If I talk about 2 different math formulas for 2 different audiences and it blesses both lives to the complete capacity of what those people individually needed, then it's kind of like looking at LeBron James and saying, oh, wait a second. He should only be a basketball player. He can't possibly make all that money with Nike as well. And also open an I Promise school. We oftentimes, I like the quote, it's my own self-driven quote, I can have my cake, I can eat it too, and I can have a conveyor belt of cakes. Thank you, Richard Branson, for inspiring that. So I think there's just more room for the view of the abundance in that reality. But to go back to your point on the ugly aspect, I love your example a lot. That it is sad that the symptom that I see that I would define as ugly is twofold. One, the people who feel bad about their podcast. That feels ugly to me. It's like, if you feel bad for what you're doing and you feel bad for the results that you're getting, then unfortunately you're a victim of expectation. And expectation is the root of all heartache. William Shakespeare, right? So if you've got unfair, unrealistic expectations with yourself, then, and you feel bad about it and you're whining to people about how hard your podcast is and how awful life is because you don't have the views that you want, or you're self-deprecating because you feel like you're second-guessing yourself and all these gurus are telling you you're doing it wrong. I feel bad for that individual because that's an ugly way to feel about life. Then there's a client who I fired a couple years ago, and she got on the Sean Kelly show, and she had 500,000 plus followers on Instagram. And she wanted to run Facebook ads, and we started to notice more and more red flags. But it also came to our attention that she was going to conferences where they would take a year's worth of photos, specifically at that conference, to showcase their true lifestyle. There's no truth in that lifestyle. It was 4 days. You made it look like your entire year is awesome based in 4 days. You think there's something ethical about that? Like, I didn't need to directly challenge this individual, but it wasn't hard to give them their money back and to start moving away from them and realizing that, no, this person makes about a janitor's salary, claiming that they live this wonderful, amazing life. And they're a complete fake, and they're cheating. They're lying to their audience, people who love them most. They're an incredible liar. That's ugly. 1, you can go to prison for it. 2, how do you sleep at night? Oh, she didn't. I remember. She said no, she couldn't. She didn't like her life. She didn't like how things were going. She wondered who could fix it. You have to fix that. If you're going to be inauthentic and you're going to manipulate your audience, you're not going to enjoy life very much. I wouldn't.
Yeah, for sure. I completely resonate with that. One of the things that I think is important on a podcast is being able to be as authentic as you can every step of the way, whether it's about your lifestyle or just about adding value to your listener while you're recording the episodes, to use your truth. Small tangent. I'm on ChatGPT
Please.
a lot lately and asking
Isn't it amazing?
ChatGPT, asking, hey, I want to do this thing, and frequently ChatGPT creates or makes up a story, just a random story. It's like,
Thank you for
my
talking
client
about
did this, my
Thank you,
client
Ab.
did that. And I have to prompt it multiple times. Hey, this isn't my client. This is my friend. Stop calling that person my client. And if you ask it to do a different prompt, every now and again, it will forget some of the old prompts and it'll go back and change it into, hey, this person I worked with and I talked. And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. I just want a story about this guy and what happened with him. We don't need to misrepresent. And I think that a lot of people might make those mistakes, not just on their own, but also because some of the AI out there is suggesting a thing and it does sound great and it does work, but we also need it to be genuine at the same time.
I wrote a piece up on this. I didn't actually write much. It's just a proof of AI. It says, this is how stupid AI marketing is. And it's an uncover of what you're talking about, the unethical nature of the tool. And we got bigger ethics issues within ourselves if we blame a tool for us being unethical. We're adults. We make the choice of whether we abandon our ethics so far that we're willing to do that or not. And it's not the favorite topic in the market of marketing, growth, or podcasting. But at the end of the day, I'm a very strict auditor. I want to be aligned with what's authentic. I want my kids, and I have 4 kiddos. I want them to, when they look at the projects I worked on, I don't want them to doubt what I did in those projects, how I was involved in it, what I was able to contribute to. I've been fired many, many times by companies. And for why? For not willing to cross certain boundaries that people say is just marketing. It's not just marketing. It's unethical. It's lying. It's illegal. And there's things that we do that so many people are doing that are unethical and lying that they don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. If your leader doesn't want to hear it, I am not the guy that you want to work with.
Let's bring it here. Our listener, a newish podcaster, they might have been doing it for 2 years or less, or about to launch a podcast. What do you feel would be good general advice for somebody who wants to start a podcast and have it successful in terms of making sure you're doing it in a way, not just talking about ethics and morality and all that, but doing it in a way that gets results, that gets in front of your right person?
One, either meditate or pray about it. Choose your semantics on that. Right? If you're aligned with your heart and your mind and you're truly out there serving individuals with what you're doing, that can be something fun. It doesn't have to be cerebral. It doesn't have to be heartfelt, but try to really gravitate towards your true inner passions on that. And the people who I find are most successful, they usually have 5 to 10 year track records with what they're doing. They are true experts. They've already gained the knowledge to be able to portray it to others. Look, you may have been a 4-year-old kid who grew up in a really, really tough situation in life where your parents are divorced and you had to learn from different siblings and you had one house that was abusive and one house that wasn't. Your name might be Jackson, in that regard. And you might know so much about life coaching by the time you're 18 years old that you'd make a pretty darn good life coach. And you can even walk circles around people who are 60, 70, and 80 because of all the experiences that have been jam-packed into your childhood. That said, you might be 60 years old and having never done something before and decide, I'm going to launch a podcast about this. Like, you might want to think through that. You might want to take space. There's a doctor, I can't remember his name. He's on YouTube, very famous guy. Maybe I'll try to look him up later and tell you. It might have been Abdul. He has a lifestyle podcast. And his formula for that lifestyle podcast is not, hey, I'm a doctor, so you should do this. He only speaks from the position of what he is learning currently. as a human being in that moment. And he's got millions of followers. It does nothing. Most people don't even know that he's a doctor. And so being willing to be authentic, to own who you are, own where you're at, that's so much easier said than done. Thank you, JP Sears, for your TED Talk, man. And I was 5 when I started, 34 when I started growing my hair out. Never done it in my life, Adam. I was terrified. I had too many insecurities. I didn't even realize that they were still buried insecurities until my son wanted to grow his hair out. And I was so against it. But his little friend that had long hair inspired me because he was a good kid with long hair. It's like a little bitty miniature version of Jesus. I was like, you know what? I'll grow my hair out with you. One of the scariest things in my life, something that stupid, that's small, something that insignificant. But being able to unpack the layers of being your true self and then fly, dedicate yourself to it, keep going, don't give up. And the piano guys, for those of you who are musicians, I got to see them live, and the celloist said, you know what, practice kind of sucks. And you're going to have to pay your dues on it and get it done. But I promise you that if you stick with it and you keep going, one day you're going to fly. And it's going to be like an entire new magic show open for you. And you're going to love practice. Stick with it. I thought his advice was prudent for podcasting.
Love it. Hey, you mentioned somebody, I don't remember his name at this moment, but you talked about how that doctor who didn't really say much that he was a doctor ended up putting out content, and his strategy was around following his journey, being along for the ride of what he's learning in the moment.
Yeah.
And it made me think that I can think of like 3 ways. And Jackson, if you've got more, please share it with the listener. It made me think there could be 3 great ways of having a podcast that works, that you can be your true self. And one of those ways is to really just have people being along for the ride through your journey. Another way would be to interview the experts, to be the person who's offering the content. You're not claiming to be the expert, but you bring on the best people that you can and you ask them the best questions that you can. And the third one would be that you truly are the expert who's put in 10,000 hours, and you're here to share that with your perfect avatar who's listening. There might be more ways to do this, but these 3 ways seem to be great ways for the listener to say, yeah, I might not be the expert, but I could do one of these other 2 things. I could interview experts, or I could just be along for the journey and let people know what I'm learning in the moment. Anything you want to share on that, or anything that you heard that you liked or didn't like?
Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
I love that. I love the boxes that you created. I tend to think outside of the box a lot. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, that box they say to think outside of, I never found it. I've never once been in a box with how I think about things. And if you remember, there's an old movie called August Rush. It's a Robin Williams movie. Yeah.
That was my favorite movie for years and years.
Oh, cool. I almost didn't mention it. I was like, nah, I got to bring it up. So I'm glad we talked about it. And this kid has an incredible talent as a musician, and he's just going places. And they put him he gets into Juilliard, and then Robin Williams has this giant fit. He's this like hobo who kind of like, it's got a really weird relationship with these young musicians that are in poverty. But he goes on his soapbox and he's like, you guys are ruining musicians with the way you're trying to box everything in based on theory. Let the kid play. Let the kid do what he does. Stop trying to put him in this box. And so I'm not going to Robin Williams you on this. I like knowing about the boxes. And in some regards, some of my podcasts have to do with those boxes. And I think some of the best shows out there, though, are just so whimsical and like ridiculous. And there's so many people in the world who gravitate towards that authenticity and that weirdness, that like you do you. J.K. Rowling wrote a book on a napkin and became a billionaire. I would tell you to this day that's a stupid strategy to follow. Like that's not the best strategy in the world. But in her case, I would have been very wrong. If you're gonna follow the napkin strategy, though, call J.K. Rowling, right? Don't try to do it by yourself that way. Gary Vaynerchuk said, if you want to have a successful show, he's like, look, here's an easy idea. Go to First Street in New York and interview 3 people. Then the next day, go to Second Street and just do random interviews with 3 people. And the next day, they said, by the day 100, you'd have such a successful show just from having done that. So that's an option. If you're looking for something to kind of get you into this because you just like the idea of playing an instrument, then certainly you can do that. My hopeful caution to you, though, is that that's probably driven by external pressures still. And my hope is that you can discover a deeper sense of like, who are you? What is it that you really, really want? I created a program. It's free. It's called passionpro.org. If you're an English lit major, you'll love the program because it asks you to write out your self-assessment. If you're not, you're probably not going to like it right now. I hope one day to have lots of counselors who can guide people through this self-discovery process, because the people who've gone through that assessment with you, some of them have life-changing experiences where they go, oh my gosh, I know exactly what I want to do. I know who I want to help. I know what I want to be when I grow up. I know I want to change my business model from this to that. It is so cool to see people's souls unlock at new levels that they could never anticipate before. And it's not my assessment. It's not me. It is these individuals' willingness become more self-aware rather than just opening a vape shop because that's the latest version of a laundromat, or opening a laundromat because Rich Dad Poor Dad told you to do it, or opening what are those called? The vending machine thingies, right? Yeah. Getting involved in REI because everybody's a real estate investor now. You can go to Walmart and put a quarter in the soda machine and get an REI license. It's nuts how addicted we are to following the path that everybody else wants to follow. At least to me, it's nuts. I don't see that as a path to happiness. It was kind of a bitter, miserable experience for me. And what really helped me get really excited about life was owning who I am and moving towards that, even though people didn't like the idea of it.
Earlier, you mentioned 10 years, starting a business for 10 years. You also talked about doing the podcast with a 10-year outcome. And it reminded me when I was listening to your podcast with Tom Fox, is it?
Yeah.
I believe you guys talked about how 97% of businesses will fail.
96.
Oh, is it 96?
Oh man, I got to correct you on
that. Before 10 years. I've heard a lot of times, I don't know if it's 100% true though.
It's an SBA.
Businesses fail 90% of the time in the first year.
It's an SBA.gov statistic.
Okay.
And you can find it on Inc. as well, their article on that. There's another argument that 67% fail, and that's a different set of variables, neither here nor there. The sadder truth, after you become a great consultant, what do I mean by that? People will tell you surface level answers all day long. We all put our facades on and we don't dig deep. It's not appropriate to dig deep right away. If you talk to enough business owners who've made it to the 10-year mark, I'm talking the 4% of people, you will find out that they have greater risk tolerance. They have higher levels of debt. They have families that are broken, that look nice on the front end. They are all suffering. They did not make it. They have survived the 10-year mark. It is very rare to find an entrepreneur who has repeated success multiple times and who is still in business 10 years later with multiple businesses. Extremely rare and worth looking at, because that's the hopeful secret to finding frameworks and formulas that work, is pay attention to not to the masses, not to what everybody else is doing, to the few who make it work. Let's pretend it is 67% though. Adam, I don't know if you have kids or not, but
a couple, 2. You've got 4, right?
Would you ever send your kids to a school where the failure rate is 67%? In Texas, we would burn the school down without even thinking about it. It's over. No way. Yet here we are as entrepreneurs drinking the Kool-Aid, listening to Forbes.com, Inc.com, all these articles. Who are the articles written by? Some of them are written by hourly wage individuals using ChatGPT to help them on the 3 steps for this, 7 steps for that. Others are written by entrepreneurs like you and myself who have an angle and a bias. And we want people to follow our angle and our bias. And it really doesn't matter what your variables are. That is an incredibly unhealthy process of growth. And we're not talking about the things that matter for scale. Infrastructure. When's the last time you heard somebody on the main stage, keynote, and talk about infrastructure, Adam?
I can't say, but it doesn't mean I have never heard it. It doesn't mean that
Totally
I
fair.
haven't.
Everybody should think about it. If you got one, comment for us. Let us know about
Yeah.
the greatest infrastructure talk you've ever heard on a keynote session. Please, I'd love to hear it.
It sounds less exciting, so I think I might be picking up your drift. Hey, I was getting into a thought and an idea because your podcast is about entrepreneurship. That's who you serve. That's who you help. And that stat of not 97%, but 96% came up recently on your podcast. And I also recall hearing that 90% in the first year may or may not be true, but
Sure.
they fail. And my question for you is from what you've learned, and you kind of have answered a little bit of that already. From what you've learned, how can the listener who's getting into podcasting and probably has a business be more likely to be in the 4% that the business does well? And I guess if you want to answer on part of that as well, like how do you do that without ruining your health or your family relationships?
Huge. I stand for balanced entrepreneurship, by the way. It's very important. One, it keeps me in check. I'm a single dad of 4. I was a stay-at-home dad all the way from the day my daughter was born. I've always been at home, and that has always come first for me. So yeah, you can have your cake and eat it too. It's actually quite simple. The formula is quite nuts for most people out there. One starts with love. If you're loving, so there's five values here: loving, patient, persistent, consistent, and reliable. Those 5 values, if I don't see a leader leaning heavily towards those strengths with those, because we all have those virtues at different levels, but there's levels to it. I've got to see that they have those 5 core values intact really well, or they have the humility to adopt those 5. If not, I don't want to work with them because they won't want to work with me. I want people who want to work with me. The next level after those 5 values, that's what I call the who. Simon Sinek says start with why. I love you, Simon. And I believe that's step 2, because I never would have listened to him about that if I didn't value who he was as a leader. Step 2 is the why. Does what they're doing light me up? Is their reason for being and their purpose that they're driving towards, that vision, one that I can support and get excited about? That is my formula. Those are the big pieces right there. And why is that my formula? Well, there's other later areas that have to be figured out, but it took me 14 years to figure out all those other areas, and a lot of startups and a lot of failures and a lot of successes. I have quite a few startups that I've worked with that have made it beyond the 10-year mark. Some of them have great balance, some of them don't, whether it's Own Local, Restaurant Connect, Video Power Marketing. The process of working with brands that have been around. At Video Power, we worked with a ton of those brands: Nordic Track, John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, Michael Hyatt, T. Harv Eckert, Billie Jean Marketing. I got to see behind the scenes on certain growth realities that most people don't get the chance to access and see. And as I studied that out, my job was the infrastructure guy. It was to be kind of the integrator of the experience and figure out how these systems played out. So all those, the who and the why, establish a pretty good idea of vision. My podcast is not about business, though. It's actually about visionary leaders. And that could be a stay-at-home mom who wants to share her vision about why it's so valuable and important to be there for your children. Beautiful vision, beautiful leader. Could be a stay-at-home dad doing the same thing. We do have another podcast called The Power Take. That's about business news. And now I have a new show coming out, thebeyourbestshow.com. And that's a totally different level where I get to hit hard and ask questions that most people don't want to be asked. I need great leaders for that show who are going to really reveal the variables and the nasty of life, because that's what we need to know if we're going to have the types of results that these leaders out there profess that they can help other people find and achieve. We need to know the variables that are the unfair advantages. So Vision's one, then these are the other 8 core principles of a business. I just gave you the formula for vision, culture, leadership, marketing, operations, fulfillment, sales, and support. Those 8 areas, we analyze those for everybody who comes in to work with us. We have an 1.5-hour form they have to fill out, or we'll do it with them if they pay a bunch of money. But we need to make sure that all 8 of those departments, we have absolute clarity for what we're doing. We know what the vision is, not because we're projecting our vision on you, because we've listened well enough to understand what your vision truly is. We need to know if there's a job description and a manual and a handbook. We need to know if there's legal operational agreements. We need to know what the profit and loss statements look like. There's so many things that most marketing agencies and businesses skim past. And, that's your call as a business. But I discourage business owners from going into business relationships with a lackadaisical process. Just as I would discourage you, don't let somebody operate on your heart as a heart surgeon if they didn't take the time to do all of the assessments up front to make sure they knew how to minimize the risk of you dying. You're trying to provide for your family. You're trying to make something of your life. It's too easy to throw a bunch of money at entrepreneurship and then blame others for not making you successful. Come on now. We're all adults. Make yourself successful.
You mentioned vision being something that you aren't going to give them your vision. You're going to make sure that they have their own vision. And that resonates with me a lot because I've learned in a mastermind that I'm part of that it's all about our personal life vision and our business vision. Like, how do we want to live our life? How do we want to live our business? It's been quite impactful. And something that they say a lot is, hey, this is Adam's vision. Don't just use his vision. You don't want to filter your things through Adam's vision. You want to filter it through your vision. And if you don't even know what your vision is, then you're not really going to be going anywhere. You'll be that fish floundering. And I'm curious, I don't know how to ask the question, but it's like, have you ever tried to filter someone else's vision through your vision?
Oh, absolutely. I made that painful mistake for years, Adam. I'm so glad. One, you likely have an amazing mastermind. And I say that because I'm not there. I'm very careful with my word choices, right? I'm careful with my evaluations in life. So till I'm there, I'm not going to tell you I have a great mastermind, but I love that principle and what they stand for. I used to control people's visions. I used to use my visionary powers to paint pictures for others. I was so much like Grant Cardone, it wasn't even funny. I used to think that was the way to do things. Tell people what they should do. Tell people what they have to do. Tell people where to look. Use the superior posture to help people realize that I knew better than them what they were supposed to do for their own lives. And I thought I was being a kind, loving, wonderful leader until my life started to come crashing down in many, many different areas of life. I was a horrible leader. I was a dominator. I was a mini tyrant on accident, but it doesn't matter. I still had a responsibility to suffer the consequences from that type of leadership style. Look, a lot of people are going to take this out of context, but love and hate are the 2 powers that we can lead with. And when you and I get hangry and we snap at somebody, we just gravitated towards hate. And we're so sensitive that we don't want to recognize that that's a power that we all have the ability to grasp and utilize. My responsibility and opportunity as a leader is, how do I stay focused on love? How do I make sure to, apologize to people when I lose my temper, or I get anxious, or I accidentally coerce or manipulate somebody into something, or I do it on purpose, right? I learned that I didn't want to have relationships like that anymore. So I created Vision Pros Live as a podcast as a means to kind of, it's like Paul in the Bible. He was killing people, Christians, and then he became, an apostle and started to follow Christianity and kind of went the reverse course. Vision Pros is kind of my reverse course of, I'm done controlling people's visions. I want to honor their vision and put it out into the world. And if they see what we're doing along the way and it draws their attention, they're like, man, I love what you guys are standing for. I love what this is all about. And I really want to work with y'all. Cool. Maybe we'll work together and do something. But it was a very big change and shift, and took me a lot of psychological books, like reading psychology books and meeting with coaches and meeting with therapists and going through a divorce that really hurt, and realizing I can be a better man. I can be a better leader. And that led to creating, I can't even describe how wonderful the relationships are on my team and the people that I'm with these days compared to, I wasn't good at being there for people, Adam. Not with that old style.
Let me ask you, with what you just said about leadership, and to make sure that we're wrapping it in always to podcasting and takeaways for podcast hosts, how do we use leadership when we are hosting our own show?
Tom's getting a lot of credit today, man. Tom talked about the importance of honoring our guests, right, with the promotions and making sure that we shine to the best light possible on the guests so they had a great experience. Paying attention to skills. The hospitality industry is one that you can learn from as a podcaster. Learning how to be hospitable, learning how to take care of people, learning to set my own desires aside and realize, okay, I'm doing this because I serve people by doing what's best for them, regardless of what's in it for me. That type of sacrifice, the meme world says is stupid, right? The world says, don't trust people. Don't give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't let people double cross you, etc. And I mean, I get all that weakness in the meme world, but I believe in giving people lots of chances. Why? Because God gives me endless chances. I believe in showing up for people and doing what's best and trying really hard not to make it about what I'm selfishly getting out of it, but what is it that I'm able to provide to them? And I sleep really well because of it. So in the podcast world, if you can show up and serve to the best of your ability, awesome. My last tip on that, I see so many solopreneurs that act like they're doing it the right way. I've never met a successful solopreneur, ever. They might, maybe two. I don't know if you're a solopreneur or not. Maybe there's some out there, but always when you get behind the scenes, they're either stepping on the faces and shoulders of the people who helped them get to where they are, or they're lying and they're not actually that great. So if you want to be your best, part of that is recognizing, how do I get other people to help me by helping them be their best? And 1 + 1 = 11. 1 + 1 + 1 = 111. Exponential growth comes from great teams.
Good stuff. Jackson, I have enjoyed this. I've learned a lot, grown through having conversation with you, and I hope the listener has taken those same takeaways. So I really appreciate who you are, how you are, and the link to your podcast is already down in the show notes. The link to your website is down in the show notes, and any social media that you wanted the listener to have to be able to connect with you is also down there too. So if you're listening, that's where you go. And our next episode is going to be a solo episode where you and I will have a conversation. That's just me sharing something with you that I know is going to help you as a podcaster. I'll see you there.
Adam Adams, Grow Your Show. This podcast, it's absolutely phenomenal. All you who have the privilege to listen into this, the way that Adam shows up, his tone, his cadence, the way he explores different opportunities with how podcasting works, how much he cares about you guys is so evident in both how we've talked behind the scenes, all the preparation he's put into preparing me as a guest for this, the attention to detail he puts into the way I show up. It would be so easy to cut so many different corners and have nobody notice, yet he shows up with an absolute first-class attitude, ready to serve, ready to help. This is the exact type of person that I want by my side in life, and I will be paying very close attention to Grow Your Show as I continue to improve everything that I'm doing in life. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you too. Appreciate it.
Oh, hey, because 3 of my clients came to me recently looking to find a way to have their podcast make the money instead of cost them money. We put together a resource for some of our clients, and I want to give it to you as well. It's something that did actually seem to help, because One of them is now making $2,600 a month. Another one's $4,500 a month. And the third is making between $5,000 and $10,000 each month. And so it's been a resource that's been incredibly valuable to them. It's our sponsor sheet template. It's a template of a sponsor sheet, and it gives you something that you can hand to potential sponsors and hopefully also be making $2,600, $4,500, or between 5 and 10K regularly each month with your podcast. So this has been a contributing factor to helping all three of those clients turn their podcast into an additional income stream for them. And the way that you can find it is just going to our website, growyourshow.com, but put in /templates, growyourshow.com/templates. And then you can actually download that template and others that could be valuable to your podcasting experience. I'll see you on the next episode.